Sir, me, young man, you have no idea who you're dealing with.
Hello. Okay, so today we are doing my first official interview with a real human being. Found her on the streets. She followed me home. Typically on this channel, we talk a lot about what it's like to be a Jehovah's Witness, or anything else that I can possibly make fun of. My guest, her name is Jo, and unlike the rest of us who were raised Jehovah's Witness, she was actually raised ex-Jehovah's Witness.
Let's do it.
Yeah, that's correct. My mom got out of the religion when she was a teenager, and all of her side of the family, when growing up, was Jehovah's Witness.
So you weren't raised with those principles, or do you think that the principles and the ideas that she was raised with, even though she wasn't a Jehovah's Witness, that those things still seem to bleed over a little bit into how you were raised in your childhood and whatnot?
Yeah, that's actually right, and it's kind of funny because growing up, you don't think of it as a Jehovah's Witness belief. You just think of it as just a belief system. And with my mom, she was never shunned or anything because she wasn't baptized. And how my grandma was, like, we were still very much involved with the family, even though we were a different religion than them.
What religion were you?
We actually were raised like anti-religion. It was kind of the concept of don't agree with any kind of organized religion. I never really thought about it too much until this last year, and how I'm like, I feel like other people didn't do like meditation group time and like practice their ESP and okay, let's move necklaces with our minds. We would practice telling the future with our dreams. Some people I grew up with, like, they'll make jokes about like, oh yeah, your mom was just like a witch or something.
That's true, I just pronounce it differently.
It was more spiritual and faith-based. In our heads, we didn't see the Jehovah's Witness as anything different from like Catholics or Mormons or any of those growing up, in my opinion.
Well, Mormons are also a cult. You had mentioned that you have gone out in service, which I was surprised to hear. I mean, I feel like I knew that. I had to have, because I can't imagine.
Yeah.
I'm her mother. I can't imagine that you came home and didn't tell me like that you went door to door. I don't know what she called it, out in service, door to door, pimping. And I imagine I probably didn't make a big deal about it because, you know, at that time in my head, it's like, well, this is harmless, because I was still snoozing my alarm back then. If you're going to join a religion, you should go with the Jehovah's Witnesses because it's still the closest thing to the truth.
Something that my like sister and brother have done too, I guess your kids.
What?
That's not mine.
Was like we would go to like youth groups and stuff of other religions with friends, so like it was no different than that in like my opinion, in my head.
I definitely encourage you guys to explore as much as possible because I knew what it felt like to have something crammed, and I mean crammed down your throat, like get your breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And maybe some pedophilia in between. And because I didn't want, not with us, her older sister.
Oh my god, that's so dark.
That I wanted you guys to be open, but for me, a lot of things were really spiritual. I had a lot of spiritual experiences when I was a kid that I was demonized. I was like 5. I let Satan into the house, and I didn't want you guys having that kind of fear.
Yeah.
I wanted you to be really, really open because I was raised in such a way of that's bad, 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 bad. Like even if you went to a garage sale or like a secondhand store, which is bizarre because Jehovah's Witnesses love secondhand stores. But then you always had to worry, like if something bad happened in the household, like did you bring a demon home when you bought that used pair of underwear?
I would be worried about bringing something home if, depending on what the object is.
Well, if it's underwear, it could be an STD. I did find out later on that a lot of people felt that way, like about hypnosis and about just, I don't know. And for me, it's like open your mind and let the universe tell you what it is. Don't let another human. If you think about people that are 1,000 years ago who were born, well, that's really nice that their parents had sex before, you know, your parents did. Therefore, they're born earlier, but they had no more higher capacity to understand things or to explain things or to read a scripture, and we give so much like weight to that. Like, right, when you think about how Catholicism, you know, was founded, that all these people were so intelligent, so smart. I'm like, and yet they couldn't figure out body odor, but they're going to tell you when the world's going to come to the end.
And that's what I mean when, like, whenever I think spiritual, because that's, like, very much of how you grew up, was more of a focus on that, and like, I sell my spirit box and things like that. Like, that was more of how religion was to me.
And if something makes sense, you keep it. If it doesn't, you throw it away. I think it's easier when you're younger, and that's one of the things that I did want you guys to have.
I appreciate it.
But we talked about a little bit of what you thought was going to happen when you were a child. What was going to happen to the world? Like, what was your future going to be like?
Something that I remember being told, like, having discussions with you, and I didn't realize this was, like, a JW belief, was, the end is coming, and, like, people will come up to me and ask if I believe in God, and if I say no, I'll be safe, but then I would never be able to leave the earth. If I say yes, they will torture me and crucify me, but I will get to go to the paradise or...
Yeah. I didn't realize that I had put, like, that same fear, whatever age it was, on you of thinking about things like that. Like, you better be prepared to either deny God and go to hell if there is a hell.
And see, that was something I remember debating people on hell, because there's no such thing as hell, obviously.
Because you were raised ex-Jehovah's Witness. It makes me sad. I know when I fully woke, like, I know it was a cult. I know that I didn't agree with a lot of things, but there is so many layers underneath you. And when I came to you, I think in 2018 or so, we worked at the same place.
Yeah.
And we were having lunch. And I was like, dude, I'm just, like, running into all this stuff on this internet. They got this thing called YouTube. Have you heard of Shane Dawson? So then I had discovered all of these channels, that gave me information and made me comfortable and safe to start questioning things. And then I hit those points where, one summer, I think I was up, like, all weekend. Like, I was so crying. I was so upset. I'm like, oh my God. And lights and stuff were going off for me. And I was terrified I was going to be an atheist. Like, that was my biggest fear. Why? Because even though you're woke, you're still not woke. When you still have those fears embedded in you. So when I came to you and I was like, I'm learning all this stuff, it's like, I know I've always said it's a cult, but it's like a cult. Like, people are dying.
Yeah, we all knew that. I still remember in my teens watching documentaries about how it's a cult.
Like, where was your mother during this time?
We just assumed.
I knew it. It's hard to explain. I knew it in a sense, but...
It was always joked about, but I can see, like, you, having all the underlying things of just the conversations I've had with you. So how I was raised was, we would ask my mom, like, oh, what's God? And then she'll be like, what do you think it is? And we would tell her some kind of story at 5.
My little pony, Megan and Sundance.
She'll be like, okay.
That's probably right.
So, like, how my belief system was, it's very self-based. And I was also raised to question everything. So even, like, you saying, like, the world's going to end, like, it wasn't something that I was harping on, because I was also raised that God is very intuitive and you kind of know when you know. And to question what anyone tells you about religion, including you. So that didn't... So it was like, oh, that could be a thing, but who knows? That's how
it still makes me sad that somewhere, like, you, I don't know if 6 or 7 or 8, that you still, like, in your head somewhere, it's like, oh my God, so I have to be prepared to be tortured. Thanks, Ma. No.
I'm not gonna lie, my head process was like, I guess I'll just have to make it good on this planet. This is all I got.
You were gonna deny God?
I know, I remember, like, thinking about, like...
You're all, God fucks me, well, fuck you.
How do you get around that? Because...
Oh man, I used to hate it. I hated those thoughts.
Do you know something kind of really interesting, though? This actually happened in the last week with my husband. We were talking, and he was raised Catholic, and I mentioned something, and what I mentioned was I had this distinct memory of, like, all the angels came to Earth, and, like, they had sex with all the humans, and that's why they were banned from the planet. And I'm like, is that a Jehovah's Witness thing, or is that an actual religious thing? And he's like, it kind of sounds familiar. And I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, it did happen. Well, no, okay, it did. It is.
I can't tell. Is that a JW thing, or is that an actual thing?
It's in the Bible.
But it's funny, like, anytime I think of, like, almost, like, outlandish religious stuff that's not, like, mainstream, I always have to think, like, is this a JW thing, or is this an actual religious thing? Because I'm not sure.
Then you found out about the Bible.
Yeah, my Bible was given to me from you when I was like middle school because I wanted to read it, so you gave me one of your copies. I didn't realize my Bible isn't the Bible, which makes sense because it doesn't say Bible on it. And I noticed like the Bibles in our house never actually said Bible.
That's because Jehovah's Witnesses, we're separate and we're different from this
Apparently
world.
they were publishing their own Bibles.
Or that. Yes. With revisions. It is interesting to me, and that's why I wanted to have this conversation, because the more that you and I, talk, we're not ready to cut the umbilical cord, so she lives downstairs.
That's not true at all. I have my own home. I live almost like across the city with my husband of many years.
What do I tell you? You don't share personal things on the internet. So
Saying that I don't live with
she
you.
lives downstairs. But yeah, it does go to show that, because my parents were not, I guess you would call them first generation, because neither one of them were born in, neither three of them were born in. I had a lot of parents. And so they don't understand what it was like for me being raised in it. It's a totally different thing. Even though I was out, I was not baptized, and many of my siblings were. Did you know when you guys were little when did you kind of understand like people being baptized or being disfellowshipped, or when you couldn't talk to people, or was it just like...
That's a little sticky with my family, our family, forget.
That's not mine.
It's not that our family is just full of criminals, but there's other stuff going on other than like religion. So
Well, that's true.
when I have different uncles like in and out of prison and juvenile situations, yeah. So like it doesn't really mean much if it's like, oh, you haven't seen him. I'm like, yeah, but like
He's in prison. Could be disfellowshipped. Could be in prison.
yeah.
Don't know.
So with the baptized thing, I know like there's been times where I've asked you about it, and for some reason in my head baptism was like not a positive thing, and it could be that's why I had that impression growing up.
Baptism was not a positive thing to me.
Yeah, so I didn't really think of it past that, and then I knew you weren't baptized.
Right. I just think it's interesting that even though through that much time, and both my parents are still believers, that was instilled in me. And then even though I was done and separated and not living that life, I didn't go to meetings. I deliberately, me, I studied with everybody and their mother just because I like it. But that how much of that bleeds still from you and then onto those that you have an impression on.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you guys were taught to question everything,
I
including
will say
myself.
I can't speak on any of my siblings. I don't know the impressions they got.
I
never felt like grandma pushed it at all, and like I'm so close with my grandma. Like we do video chats and stuff, and I think one of the reasons why we're so close is because it's not topics we talk about. Like it's not something she pushes, and of course like we'll be talking, and if she says something about Jehovah, like it'll be a very like passing thing.
Oh, praise Jehovah.
She does send me magazines and stuff, but I think that's just more endearing because it's like my cute little grandma sending me her religious stuff. Like it's not something I grew up in, so it's not something that I have to kind of take seriously.
You don't feel threatened by it? Or...
No, I don't at all feel threatened by it.
And that's cool because it's not very common for Jehovah's Witnesses. A lot of them really, really do push their things, but I think that's why my mom ended up in that back room so often throughout her JW life. Because she will push boundaries, and I think that she does value relationships, but then it's really sad because then she gets scared. Like, she will pull back.
I could see that, yeah.
She'll pull back, like, all of a sudden, this and this was bothering my conscience, so I've been praying about it, and I'm like, oh, fuck, here we go again. We gotta start all over. She's less likely to do that with you guys.
I think it also helps that she's always been more of a non-traditional Jehovah's Witness. Like, I still remember, like, my grandma would be, like, out in the front yard watering the grass with no bra on and wearing like a little bandana shirt, and like that was no problem. It was a problem to me, but that's
my school bus was on the corner of my house.
She was a very young, like hippie-esque grandma.
There was a pink toilet in the front yard with flowers growing out of it. I mean, I'm glad that you're not permanently damaged from that. I'm sure there's other things that I've definitely done that will come out eventually. Yeah. Obviously, my spawn are, above most standards. Higher IQ, problem solvers, the great thinkers of the great thinkers. The great thinkers of this world. But there might be other people who were raised ex-Jehovah's Witness who are not as well
Rounded.
and adapted as my spawn, which I made by myself too. Mom's love and Jehovah's magic.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
I will. See you next time.
I'm on the television!
I'm gushing blood. What do you want for dinner? How old were you that you knew about menopause? I mean, when I changed a poopy diaper, I didn't be like, oh, this baby has a solid fart. No, it shit itself.
Did you hear about the kidnapping? Yeah, he woke up.
Who?
The kidnapping. He woke up because the kid was napping.
I hate your dad jokes over here.
I'm